I'll give you the first one.
Of the, not the Tanakh, but
Yeah, the Torah.
Torah.
Yep. The Tanakh, the Torah is the
Right.
is the T of Tanakh. Okay.
Prayer.
Avadim, prayer. Yep. Okay.
Good works.
And good works. Yep. I won't make you say them in Hebrew, but yeah, good works.
A-V-U-D-A-H.
That's prayer. Yep.
How do you say that one?
Which one?
A-V-U-D-A-H.
I don't.
Avodah. When you ask that question, you try to remember those words. Those are impossible words to remember.
I gotta punch them up in my notes here. Yeah, avodah is A-V-O-D-A-H. Avodah.
What's it? Oh.
Yeah. And then you have Torah, which is the law, avodah, which is prayer, and then you have the gemult chasadim, which are good works, right?
Yep.
So Jesus has gone after each of those pillars. So he starts with the Lord's Prayer. So he's teaching the right way to pray, which is not the way that the Pharisees are praying in the streets during their times of prayer, which happen how many times daily? 3. There's one at dawn, there was one at dusk, and then there was one where? In the middle of the day. So what these Pharisees would do is they would make sure that they were somewhere public at noontime, and so when this prayer came around, time to pray, they would do it on an open street corner in front of everybody. And what does Jesus say about that?
Don't do it that way.
They've received their reward, right? All right, we've talked about the gemut chesadim, the good works that they're doing. What does Paul say about, or Paul? What does Jesus say about good works?
It says if you do it in front of men, once again, you'll have
You have your reward.
Yeah.
So he says, do it in private. Do not let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. Don't make a public spectacle of it. Right? We talked about how they would used to give offerings, right? The offering, the tithing receptacle was at the very front of the temple entrance, and it would make a loud bang when he would drop heavy amounts of money in it. And so they would bring their massive amounts of money, they would drop it in, it would clang, it would make a loud sound, and they knew by how loud the sound was how much money. And of course, when you hear a loud bang like that, what are you going to do? Turn around and figure out where the noise came from, right? Okay? So he's saying don't let those good works, because tithing, giving alms, which is something they were commanded to do, those are good works. Don't do them in front of men, but do them in front of God. Because the Pharisee has all the reward he's going to get, which was the attention for making the noise and maybe a brief esteem from men because of the amount that he gave, right? And then you have the Torah. Jesus goes after the Torah. The law. Where he says, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery, right? But I tell you, any man who commits or who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. He's getting after the heart of the matter. It's not just, have you heard the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law? It's not just the letter of the law, but there's the spirit or the heart behind it that Jesus is getting at. So he's talking about these 3 pillars that were incredibly important to everyday Jewish life and how they're properly expressed in his teaching. Okay? So follow the law internally, because he who follows the law internally will follow it externally. Pray in private. so that your Father in heaven will hear your prayers, and do your good deeds so that no one knows you're doing them. Right? Do them in private. Do not let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. And now he's talking about where we started looking at the week before last. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where you're putting the confidence that you have in things, or the things in which you put your confidence, how they should be that which comes from above and not that which is below, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves can break in and steal. All right? So we're picking up in that section. So Torah, prayer, good works. You can even say law. What's the Torah? What makes up the Torah? Anybody remember?
The law.
Right, but in our Old Testament, what part makes up the Torah?
And chapter 20, 20 something of Exodus. Plus all the minutia, the 600 whatevers.
Pentateuch, which is
Yeah, there you go. Pentateuch. Okay, the Pentateuch is the entire Torah. So that's how we Pentateuch, 5 writings. So that would be what the law is. So when they say the law, they're talking about the first 5 books, and that's where the law is explicated. That's where the law is given. Okay. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Remember what Deuteronomy means? Deutero, namas. Second law, second giving of the law. So that would be the first 5 books. So those are very important because that gives everything that is needed for Jewish faith and practice, then prayer and good works. Our audience, just to do this real quick, are the Pharisees and the scribes who are there. What's important about the Pharisees? Who are they to Jesus? They're Jesus' peers, right? So we've said this before, bears repeating. In order to be a rabbi, you had to belong to one of the sects that were there. So you had to be a Pharisee, you had to be a Sadducee, you had to be an Essene, you had to be a Zealot, you had to be one of these. And so for Jesus, he was a Pharisee because they're the kind of the traditionalists. The Sadducees were more the liberals, okay, in terms of theology. But the Pharisees were the traditionalists. They also have the benefit of believing in the physical resurrection, which is important for Jesus, as opposed to the Sadducees who did not. So he's calling out his own peers. All right, and the Pharisees were actually the traveling teachers. So they were the itinerant preachers of the day. What does Jesus do? Yes. He travels and teaches. Okay, so those are the Pharisees. So there's the Pharisees. There are his disciples who are there. And then there is the crowd, okay? And who's the crowd made up of? Jews. Where is he giving this teaching?
on the Sea of Galilee.
In Galilee, okay? Very Jewish region, okay. Now, that is not to make light of the fact that Galilee's on one side of the lake, and then you have big Roman settlements on the other side of the lake, okay? So, but yeah, this area is primarily Jewish. So bring him in verse 24. No one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. All right. So, quick little teaching on this. No one can serve 2 masters. This is a reduction of life to one simple choice. And for Jesus, it's pretty easy. Humans, while we have free will, we're never truly free in the most important respect of the word. We're always going to be serving either God or that which isn't God, right? So that's what Jesus is teaching here. You will hate one or love the other. So this is called a Jewish parallelism. And when he's talking about hate and love, these are idioms of comparison. So if you were to look this up in a Jewish writing style or a Jewish speaking style, idioms of comparison. We even have these, right? All right, so what is an idiom?
It's a saying or
An
a phrase.
expression, right? An expression used to convey an idea. Okay. And what is unique about idioms?
Is it like something like you eat like a pig?
Okay. Yeah, that's an idiom. But what is unique about idioms? What is unique? Idioms are language dependent. Or I should say language and really culture dependent. Okay. So, if I said, that's your third strike, okay, what does that indicate to you? Like, you fill that in. If I say that's your third strike,
You're out.
you're out, okay? Does that make sense in a place that knows nothing about baseball?
No.
No. It's language and culture dependent. So it's an idiom. How many of you know, and this is going to be weird, how many of you know that the U.S. national cricket team beat the number 6 team in the world, Pakistan, 2 days ago in Texas? Okay. In cricket, there are these things called the bails. So when you knock the bails off, do you know what that means? You're out.
Yeah.
The batsman is out. But that is not an idiom that is common in our vernacular, right? Or if I say he kicked it through the uprights, what does that mean?
Means football.
He football, right? He hit a field goal, but when I say he kicked it through the uprights, I mean he crushed it, right? He did a good job, right? He went right through the uprights, okay? That makes sense in English. But if I said he sailed it over the crossbar, do you know what that means? Yeah. Most people who are familiar with soccer know what a crossbar is, right? You got this net behind you, you got the keeper, you kick the ball over the top of the goal and it sailed behind it, right? Means you completely missed.
Oh, you missed.
Yeah, because you kicked it over the crossbar.
Good thing. You
No.
didn't get that hard.
Okay, so these are all language and culture dependent. So a culture that is really up on soccer knows what kicking it over the crossbar means. Whereas somebody who, this is a crossbar too, but I kicked it through the uprights, a culture that's really familiar with American football will know what that means. When we're looking at love and hate, it's an idiom of comparison, okay? And it's specifically really a Jewish idea. It doesn't refer to love and hate in a traditional sense, but it is the way in which one prioritizes things. Okay? So when Jesus says, he'll use the same kind of idiom when he says, no one can come to me unless he hate mother, father, brother, sister, right? Is he really saying you have to hate your brother, your mother, father, and your sister? No, he's saying they have to be in a place of less priority than I am, right? That's what this idiom of comparison is saying. So, God first, money second. God first, things second. In fact, this word mammon, there's a lot of confusion over what this word actually means. It's the term from wealth that comes from a Hebrew root word. Hebrew is a little different than English because it's a root word based language, so it does some funky things to the vocabulary. So you have to, in order to understand a word, know what the root word is, and that informs how you handle the actual word. Okay, it's a really strange way that they do it. But really, this root word means to store up or to entrust. All right? It was originally used to denote a person putting his trust in another by investing money with him. It came to mean that in which one trusted. All right? So mammon is that in which one trusts. So where's your trust? That's what Jesus is getting at. It seems to emphasize the object on which one bases his security. So do you put your security in things, or do you put your security on God? So it's not just necessarily wealth, but it can also be material things. We get this notion. How many of you heard that the Syrians had a god of money that was called Mammon? You heard that? That was a theory that was made popular by A.T. Robertson, but it's not really, it doesn't align with the scholarly consensus, so it's kind of been thrown out. But William Barclay asserts that the ancient Mediterranean Mammon came to be spelled with a capital M as a way to designate a deity, but again, that's conjecture. Because this is a Hebraic word. It has a root word in Hebrew, which means to store up or entrust. So there's really no deific connection that we can find. But needless to say, money itself is not the problem, but it's stressing the priority of money over God. The tragedy of money is that we never have enough, and soon it possesses us instead of us possessing it. The more money we have, the more we are worried about losing it, and thereby we are consumed with protecting it. That's kind of the sense of what Mammon is trying to encapsulate. It's that which we place our trust, almost to the point of anxiety. So, any questions on that? All right.
Well,
Observation.
Yeah.
Growing up, there got to be a point in my life when I had a lot of possessions, and then I realized they owned me.
Uh-huh.
I had to take care of them all. They were a burden.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
But there is a sense in which you were supposed to be good stewards.
Yes. But again, it's a priority thing. Again, money isn't the problem. It's putting money over God that's the problem. So Jesus is talking about your priority. That's why that understanding of that idiom of comparison, you will love one and hate the other. You will put one in priority over the other, or you'll come to despise one over the other. So you can come to despise physical possessions, okay, and just kind of eschew them all together. Jesus isn't arguing for that either. What he's arguing for is a proper priority. And we see that when he talks to the rich young ruler, right? The rich young ruler says, I've followed the Torah, I pray, I've done good works. What more must I do to be saved? What does Jesus say to him? Sell all that you have, give your money to the poor, and follow after me. It's a step too far for the rich young ruler. Why? It's his priorities. He's prioritized mammon over God. So Jesus is like, you can keep the Torah, you can do prayer, you can do good works, but your priority is not in the right place. I don't think Jesus was actually advocating for him to sell all that stuff. He was testing the guy, right?
Are you willing?
Are you willing to let it all go? Some have used that to preach, you get the vow of poverty out of there, right? And that's not necessarily what Jesus is advocating for. He was testing the guy's priorities. Jesus does that quite a bit with people. He tests their priorities. So, for example, when the Syrophoenician woman comes to him and says, heal my daughter, and he goes, I haven't come to you, I've come to the Jews. And she's like, well, even us dogs, Gentiles, get scraps from the table. He's like, he was testing her priorities, right? He tests the centurion's priorities, right? Take me to your daughter, and I'll heal her. And the centurion says, Lord, I just have to give an order to somebody, and it's done. So you could do that too. Yeah. And Jesus is like, okay, it's done. You know, testing priorities, testing assumptions. He tests the priorities of the people who bring to him the woman caught in adultery. And it's interesting to me that the old men leave first. and that the young guys stay around and they're like, nah. You know, that's it. Anyway, that's always struck me as interesting. All right. We'll get through a little bit of this. I don't know that we'll get through all of it. All right, so the next section, do not worry. Starting in verse 25 there. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't there more to life than food, and more to the body than clothing? Look at the birds of the sky. They do not sow or reap or gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable than they are? And which of you by worrying can even add an hour to his life? Why do you worry about clothing? Think about the flowers of the field grow, and how the flowers of the field grow. They do not work or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his glory was clothed like one of these. How would Jesus know that?
Because he's around there all the time with Solomon.
Because he's God, right? And this is how God clothes the wild grass, and if this is how God clothes the wild grass, which is here today and gone tomorrow and tossed into the fire and the heat of the oven, won't he clothe you even more, you people of little faith? So then don't worry, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? For the unconverted pursue these things. And your heavenly Father knows that you need them, but above all pursue his kingdom and righteousness, and these things will be given to you as well. So then do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. The day has enough trouble of its own. Priority. Getting back to still priority. Do not worry. Okay, remember anytime we see the word if, sometimes we can translate that as since. Especially in that section, but if this is how, and if this is how, in verse 30, and if this is how God clothes the wild grass, you could say, and since this is how God clothes the wild grass, okay? And since this is how God takes care of the birds, okay? And since he feeds them, all right?
I think one of the neatest weeds are dandelions. Just this, all the
Seed pod.
seeds are, yeah, they just go flying through the air. I think that
Drives-
all of them, that's probably one of the neatest ones. and
Drives my
considered
allergies
a weed.
nuts.
And God says we could eat it too.
So,
I don't know about the top part, but it's leaves.
So for this reason, I say to you, for this reason can also be on account of. So Jesus has just gotten done teaching this massive section. And he says, for this reason. Why is he saying for this reason? For this reason, another word for this reason? Anybody know what another? Sort of.
Therefore,
Therefore. We found a therefore, for this reason. Okay? So, for this reason, therefore, what is he summing up? What is he summing up? Let's take a look at what he's been teaching about. Okay?
it's not, everything's not dependent on your good works.
He's been talking about the law.
All these other things.
He's been talking about the law, right? Anger, murder, fulfillment of law and the prophets, adultery, divorce, oaths, retaliation, love for your enemies. He's talked about pure-hearted giving, good works. He's talked about prayer, right? Avodah. He's talked about prayer. He's talked about treasures. He's talked about all of this. And so he's now saying, therefore, don't worry. Therefore, don't worry about your life. All right? So there's a logical connection to this whole section, but most immediately, really, to 19 through 24. Okay? Where he's talking about prioritizing God over money or money over God. Do not worry about your life. This is an imperative. Who remembers what an imperative is? We have imperatives in English. What is an imperative?
Imperative is immediate action.
An imperative Imperative is a command. So if I tell you run, that's an imperative. Okay? If I say everyone out of the building, that's an imperative, okay? An imperative is a command. So think about it like an officer in the army, or even an NCO giving an order to somebody lower in rank. Okay, imperative, command. All right. So when Jesus says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry." Do not worry. That's a command. Are commands optional? No. Do not worry.
Is that a reality?
It should be. But often it is not. Okay? But since Jesus is saying it, it's likely that, he's commanding us not to worry. And why? And he gives very good evidence for why we shouldn't worry. Okay? It's not that we won't worry, because we're still fighting the human nature. But we take comfort in the fact that he says, don't worry. And he says that because of the way that God takes care of the wildlife. They don't worry about food. They don't worry about money. They don't worry about clothing. Yet, the birds are fed, the flowers grow. Okay? And your God is faithful. That's essentially what he's getting at. This type of imperative that he's giving, which is meant as a command to stop an action that's already in progress. Okay? So this action of worrying is already in progress, and Jesus is saying, stop. It's like Zane running toward a cliff, and I yell out to Zane, Zane, stop! He's doing an action in progress. I want him to stop that. Okay, that's what Jesus is saying. It's an action already in progress, and you're being told to stop. You can see parallel passages if you want to. We're not going to turn there right now because we're short on time. But Philippians 4:6 is the same construction, and Matthew 6:25 states this general practice in light of the previous verses. The King James Version says, take no thought for, which is unfortunate because it implies in our day that it's planning about the future is inappropriate. This is surely not the case. The key thought here is the worry. So that doesn't mean we don't plan. That doesn't mean we don't take into account potential future contingencies, but it means that we're not worrying. You can plan for the future without worrying. Okay. Physical life is important, but it is not the ultimate. What is the ultimate?
Eternal life.
Eternal life. Okay. So again, Jesus is not stressing that life here is unimportant, but the focus is, the priority is working toward eternal life, right? The world is simply the training ground for a fuller, more intimate fellowship with God. The biblical truth is that God does care for his children, and he will provide for their basic needs. And we see that in the way he takes care of the birds of the air. Wild birds and wildflowers are appropriate because the text does not specify a particular kind of bird or flower, but simply common ones. Which is kind of cool because it's still even like, he could have said a bird's very specific to Israel and we would have no idea what that is. He could have said a flower very specific to Israel and a time and place that no longer exists today. There was a very beautiful flower that existed in the Roman Empire that no longer exists today because it was so good at preventing pregnancy that Rome wiped it out.
Wow.
Yeah. He could have referenced, and it was a beautiful flower from all accounts. Jesus could have referenced that flower, and we'd have no idea. And it would have been a bad representation because it no longer exists. But he just said, in general, birds and wildflowers.
I think what's interesting too, I got a hold of a children's book that's talking about all the insects that can be eaten. All the so that if you are really hungry, you don't need to be really hungry. Because crickets, yeah, there are worms.
Uh-huh.
There are worms under the ground everywhere. So there's always nutrients available to us if we are willing to eat them.
Right.
I'll pass, I'll leave that.
So this will be the last point. We'll get through verse 26, but we won't get through all of it. We'll pick it up next week. Are you not worth much more than they? This is a typical rabbinical type comparison of the lesser to the greater. So we've just had an idiom of comparison, and now we have a lesser greater comparison. Okay, so again, these are rhetorical styles that are very common in rabbinic teaching. And why is that important? Why does that inform how we should treat these things? Jesus is a Pharisaical rabbi. He's well versed in these rhetorical tools that he's using. So, a lesser to greater than comparison helps us to understand the priority of things. The Bible is clear that God created and loves the animals, but animals cannot fellowship with God as human beings made in his image can. Be careful of making living animals more valuable than the lives of humans. PETA, right? Animals were given for food and service after the fall. They are not eternal. Humans are. Evangelism is more important than animal rights, according to, Piper. Most of the animal life which is created has gone out of existence. Did you know that? We have more species extinct today than are currently alive on the earth.
I did not know that.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep. And yeah. Yep. So some groups care more about animals than they do people, which according to Jesus is a warped worldview. We tend to protect animal rights more than we do human rights. Did you know it's illegal to destroy a bald eagle egg, but it's legal to kill an infant in the womb? Anyway. All right. That's kind of that's the Christian worldview ethic that we have to wrestle with, right? And how sometimes we come into opposition with a Christian ethic will come into opposition with the world. So yeah, just one word. Cruelty to animals says a lot about a person, and it was largely condemned in the Torah. There were penalties for being cruel to animals in the Torah. So it's not that animals are unimportant. It's not that we shouldn't treat animals well, but they should not take priority over humans, over human beings, over your fellow man. Okay?
That always bothers me in India, where they're starving people and their cows walking around.
Cows everywhere because they worship cows. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Animals were a part of the original creation in Genesis 1 and will be a part of the new creation when the heavens and earth are remade. I, for one, can't wait to see a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Just saying.
I don't want to see those flying monsters that eat people.
So, this will interest the science nerds among you. I like to read a lot, and I read an article the other day that said most paleontologists today believe that T-Rex did not walk upright, but walked on all fours. They weren't that tiny. So, yeah. The way that they're drawing them now, the way that they've studied the musculature and how the tendons, because you can see, even on the human skeleton, you can see where the tendons are attached to the bone, right? Because it makes indentations in the bone from the tension. And so you can tell based on how the tendons were tensioned in the skeleton that it's more than likely that Tyrannosaurus actually walked on all fours because of the way the tendons torsioned against the skeleton. It was kind of, anyway, that's neither here nor there. But that's the models they're making now. Because it makes more sense that theropods like that would have walked on all fours.
Well, the other thing we don't know is what color skin the dinosaurs had. And these huge, humongous dinosaurs, maybe God made them bright yellow or bright pink or something.
Right.
So that the people would see them coming and run. Instead of giving them camouflage colors. Maybe God in his mercy and
Yeah.
would make them, but when you see them being drawn, they're all drawn in camouflage colors.
Well, that's just because that's how we think, predators normally are camouflaged. There's a reason, like God designed, it's super cool. God designed the perfect predator for the jungle, which is the tiger, right? We talk about how the lion is the king of the jungle. The lion doesn't even live anywhere near the jungle, so I don't know how that's possible. The king of the jungle is the tiger. And we think, because we're also predators, predators have color vision, okay? So we think that tigers stick out like a sore thumb because they're white and black and orange. And they have that weird striping pattern. Well, most prey animals also are eyes face forward. So predators' eyes face forward.
See only in black and white, the prey do.
Prey only see in black and white. And so the orange stripes and the black stripes mimic how sunlight to a prey animal mimics through the trees. And so